Well, I was born in 1927, December the 13th, to be exact. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. My parents lived in an industrial area of Memphis, which still exists. The industrial area does, even though most of the buildings have been demolished and rebuilt. But we lived on the second floor above a dry goods store. My parents and my mother's brother and his new wife bought the dry goods store business from my paternal grandfather on the occasion of their marriage. And so that's where I grew up. In addition, my uncle, Nathan Thomas, and his wife, Rena Thomas, who was from Atlanta, they lived on that second floor apartment, as did my parents. And in addition, that's two families already. My father's best friend had lost his business in the Depression, and he had wanted to marry his sweetheart. And so my parents and my uncle offered them that they could come and live with us above the dry goods store on the second floor of that store. So we ended up with three families in one apartment with two bathrooms. And that's where ultimately there were 9 children from those three families that lived together. And so that's where we began my recognizable life. We never knew what we didn't have, and so we didn't expect it, like air conditioning or anything like that. No one ever dreamed of such a thing. So we didn't know what we did not have. My grandfather, Moses Belz, came to Memphis by himself. His new wife and their new son, my father, they had to leave Lancet, which became a part of Poland. They left it because he was going to be conscripted into the Polish army, where he would have to stop observing the religious doctrines which are a part of his life, as his parents' lives were. And so they realized they didn't have enough money to buy tickets for my grandmother and my little father, as well as my grandfather. So they decided they should pool the money that they had raised and bought a ticket for him to come over here to Memphis, Tennessee, where his older brother had come to Memphis some years before. And he would work somehow and earn enough money to send for my grandmother and my little father as soon as possible. That took him 5.5 years working as a peddler to earn enough money to buy the ticket to bring the other two of them over here. My mother and father married in 1925, and they were both in their early 20s. We had a wonderful relationship. I admired him so much and was so proud of him. He was a person of tremendous talent. He was a musician. He had started singing in the choir at Baron Hirsch when he was very young, and he had a beautiful voice. And then he became rather well known in the Memphis community, in the Jewish community, and in the general community as a person who could sing on concerts or receptions, weddings, and things like that. And that's one of the things he did. While we were still living on Thomas Street in North Memphis, he managed to acquire some ground across the street from our dry goods store, and he started building small buildings for occupancy by different companies, very small buildings, but nevertheless buildings. And so he became quite adept at that. And he came into the furniture manufacturing business with a cousin of his who was the son of his father's older brother, who had come to Memphis before my grandfather came here. And they had gone in the furniture manufacturing business. And ultimately, my father built a furniture factory in the same general North Memphis area where we lived, not next to it, but within a few blocks of that. And that's where we began our business, which started growing. And sometime after that, I was still, by that time I had gone away to MIT, to college, and I was in communication constantly with my father, who I admired so much. And so when I came back in 1948 in January, I took licensing exams in Knoxville, Tennessee, at the university at that time, and got my license for heavy construction building permits. And we then went into our own construction business and started building things and larger buildings and things. And one thing went from another, and larger. We started off with small stores. We ended up with building a shopping center, and then another shopping center, and building apartments, and we just started growing, and our business flourished over a period of 10 or 15 years, let's say, and then got bigger and bigger. We were just blessed with living in a time when you didn't have to have special favors to get the right to think and use your mind and progress. And so that's what we did. And then our business grew and prospered and expanded. In our own family, there was a family called Weil, W-E-I-L, who were in Germany, and that was the first family that my father brought over here. And it turned out there was a Mr. Hirsch Weil, his wife, and 2 sons. But the Weil family came here when Jack Weil, who later worked for us in our business for the rest of his life. One of the Wachter girls was named Bertel, and she married a gentleman named Sauerbrunn. And my parents brought them over here, and they came out of Belgium, and they managed to. She was an ingenious lady. they managed to show up in Memphis, Tennessee with trunks full of dishes and fine embroidery and things like that she had been able to collect. And my father finally put her in a retail business which still exists with her progeny today. And her husband, my father put in one of his manufacturing plants that made bedroom shift robes, cabinets where you close. And so that was another one. Then the Wachtels, which were her two brothers, they had a family chain of shoe stores in Germany, and he brought them over here. So those were people that I knew and remembered, continued relationship over the years. Another gentleman, Mrs. Saharavici, who you made mention of having visited with her. She and her parents were brought over here by a uncle of hers. He brought his family over here, and that's Mrs. Saharavici. Now, the Saharavicis were not refugees in the normal sense, but they were put in a camp right about the end of World War II, and they lived in Italy. They were from Romania, and they lived in this camp for about a year in Italy and learned how to speak Italian and so forth. And Frederica, who became Frederica Saharavici, and her husband married in Romania. She said in her mother's bedroom. They couldn't get a synagogue because they couldn't have that kind of freedom. But she remembers where they married and so forth. And then they managed to come here and obtained a job. And ultimately, I met them at Baron Hirsch in about 1960. Sam Weinrich came to this community somehow. There was an assembly through the Jewish Federation of bringing Holocaust survivors to this community. Sam and Frieda Weinrich were one of the couples. And it turned out that Sam Weinrich's family in Poland, where he came from, had a furniture store, several furniture stores, and he had been in the furniture refinishing department of those stores. And so when he came to work for us in this project that we had started. And in as much as he had experience in furniture refinishing, he ended up with experience in painting, and he became the superintendent of our maintenance, and a very frugal man, and he managed to save money and put money aside, which we helped him invest. Sam worked for our company. He was a maintenance superintendent on industrial buildings, which we had, which were considerable. And he was a person that started in the industrial area and then stayed on with us and continued to maintain buildings in our portfolio of properties. And he became a very well-known man in this community. His children were educated, of course, in the Jewish day schools and were quite observant. And he's just a person that everybody has respected. I believe it was President Lamar Alexander at the time of the formation of the Tennessee Holocaust Commission. I believe he was the governor at that time. And Leonid, myself, Congressman Steve Cohen, and a couple of other people felt that we needed to have a program in the state of Tennessee to acknowledge and support the needs and futures of those people that had been suffering as Holocaust survivors, and that in order to prevent this type of thing from happening anywhere at any other time in either the United States and hopefully in the world in the future, we needed to come and educate our teachers to in turn educate their children that are in their classrooms from the horrors of the Holocaust. So we came up with the idea of a Tennessee Holocaust Commission on Education. And that's when this happened during the term of, I'm almost positive it was Governor Lamar Alexander. And Leonid, myself, Steve Cohen, who is a congressman now, and 2 or 3 others whose name I just can't mention or can't remember at this moment. But we became the original founding members of the Tennessee Holocaust Commission on Education. And it wasn't too long after that that we expanded the commission a bit, and it was highly supported by the legislature. It seems to me we were asked to come before every year they had a program on Holocaust at a certain time of the year, and they asked us to speak to the entire legislature. I just find it inconceivable of the true increase in anti-Semitism, which is being experienced not just here, not in our community, but in this country and in this world that's going on. Why is it that there can be such hatred in the face of such disaster that has befallen people before? And I think it's a part of human nature is to always find a scapegoat for anything that people are not satisfied with. They're going to find someone to blame it on, or some event, or some group of people. And it happens that the Jewish people, for the millennia, have been persecuted all the way going back before the time of the Crusaders. And this has gone on from generation to generation, from one region to another. We are all children of one God. And as children of one God, we should all be concerned with the welfare of one another. And that has nothing to do with race, religion, or anything. It's just we're human beings riding on one planet that's spinning around in this universe. And it's very difficult for me, being one of those people riding around on this planet, to comprehend why it is in human nature to find a scapegoat for everything that they don't find to their own personal like.